I met a little fella by the name of Warbook from the Free World League. Loud and very ugly, living his best pug life. Had him dreaming of being a rich warrior pilot, sitting on his grandma's lap and he's fighting compose. The boy was shy away from nothing. That's a jag. Warbook pointed at it. I don't think it's a cat. I think this person might be my dad. That's the battle master. Oh no, excuse me, my hand slipped and destroyed it by accident. Warbook destroyed me again. Warbook destroyed another lance. Like he said he would know, he didn't even apologize. Warbook did it to you. You little warpug, not like the kindest guy. Unsportsmanlike, shoot your legs and warpug die. An eye for an eye, a man 5'9" and a hateful rise. Shooting DCK players like they shot Cujo. Little pug dog with a burgundy coat. Warpug destroy me again. Warpug destroy me again. Warpug did it to you. Warpug destroyed another lance. Like he said he would, and then laughed in your face at the beginning. Warbook did it to you, and laughed in your face again. Like he said he would, and then laughed in your face at the beginning. Warbook did it to you, and laughed in your face again. Like he said he would, and then laughed in your face at the beginning. Warbook did it to you, and laughed in your face again.
Warpugs, what's up?
Like he said he would. No, he didn't even apologize. Warbook did it to you, and laughed in your face again.
Guys, it is massive times for horrible war crimes. It is the First Secession War. Guys, we are going to check out a little bit more of this, okay? Now, Sven Vanderplank has wanted to come to a live stream for a bit. So, with that being said, Saturday morning, we are going to finish this off, okay? Saturday morning, we are going to finish this, okay? Well, Saturday morning, my time. For Sven, it'll be later in the day, but I'm going to set things up so Sven can come in and just be here with us. I'm going to see if he wants to pop into the Discord. If he does, great. I'll have him in here with me, you know, so he can give us some more knowledge about some things that happened in the First Secession War. Because anytime you're writing a script like this, and covering a mass historical period like this, it's kind of like the Siege of Rax, okay? It's kind of like the Siege of Rax. SRX, hey, bud, what's up? Welcome to the live stream, bud. Anytime you get a live stream like anytime you get a history like this, you're bound to leave stuff out because you simply didn't think about it. You didn't remember it. It happens. So I'd love to have him there just ready to go. Like, it'd be so cool. Guys, this is learning about Battletech. I am really happy to be doing this with you guys. I'm just ready to go. Who's ready to go? Because we learned about how bad this was getting, and it's only the first year. The incompetence is on display massively. Yes, the reunification war was just a warm-up. And you guys were telling me, wait till you get to this first secession war. And I have been saying over and over again, how did this happen to the Inner Sphere to where they went from the Star League being a preeminent power to when the clans walked in, they were just technologically absolutely bass-ackwards. What happened to them? What occurred? Also, this is the first live stream I've done since, basically, I called off shenanigans on Friday. I was in a lot of pain on Friday. A massive amount of pain on Friday. It's the first time since I started shenanigans, since I started up shenanigans, the Friday night stream, where if I missed it on Friday, I didn't make it up. And there was a reason behind that. I was actually questioning for a bit if I was going to do this live stream or not. I'm feeling a lot better now. I appreciate everyone who has sent me messages on Discord. And I appreciate everyone who has sent me emails, left comments on the videos that I've put out since then. I couldn't record for several days. I was in a lot of pain, you guys. To be very succinct about what was going on, I had an infection, and it was getting to the point where I live because of basically how much stress I put on my joints over the years, everything like that. I live at about a 4 on the pain scale. I just do. I don't take pain medication for that pain, because if I'm ever in a state where I need pain medication, I want it to work. Like, even now, my leg hurts, my right arm feels kind of numb, these 2 fingers right here are tingling. It is the nature of the beast. It's what I live with on a day-to-day basis. And I don't take pain medication for it, because when I do, I want it to work. Okay? And I already have an addictive personality, and I already have that kind of addictive. I understand my own flaws. I don't want to take something unless I absolutely need to. And my wife says I'm notorious for it. Okay? My wife says I'm absolutely notorious for it, where I will literally be sitting there just struggling with pain, struggling to deal with pain. Especially when I would do long drives. When I drove from Reno to Indiana, like, there were times where I had to pull over to the side of the road because my leg was knocking up so hard, and it was just intensely painful. And even then, I was only taking over-the-counter medication for it. The pain was so bad on Thursday and Friday that I didn't care at all. It was like when I went to urgent care, I was like, give me something, give me anything to stop this. I don't care if you have to put me to sleep for a while. This has to stop, because I am unable to deal with it. I mean, and this is coming from me, where, you know, I have a really high pain threshold naturally, just because of how much I've dealt with over the years. Raina, like, I have said in all honesty at some points where I would sit there and look at my wife and just say, give me an axe, I'm chopping my leg off. It was that bad. Like, that's how bad my leg pain has been in the past. Give me an axe, I'm chopping the leg off. And even then, I would deny pain medications. Even then, I would deny pain medication. This pain was so horrifically bad that I couldn't even vocalize how bad I was hurting. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't stand up. Every time I did it was right through here. Anytime that I did anything with, like, my mouth, if I chewed, if I spoke, if I closed my jaw, if I opened my jaw, it would put me in a state where it was just completely unbearable, where, you know, I couldn't even talk about it. And my wife is down in Florida right now helping out with her family. And it was the first time that she has known me to where I did not care about what I was, like, just give me anything. Get as strong as you can give it, because that's how much pain I was in. That has largely receded. My mouth up through here is still in a lot of pain. Like, I'm still, you might see me flinch. I might actually lose some teeth up here because of what happened. But yeah, it was that serious. I didn't duck out on shenanigans because I wanted to take Friday off. I called off shenanigans because, quite literally, I did not want to be sitting here trying to, enjoy myself with you guys, and trying to enjoy myself with you guys. And then all of a sudden, get hit with it, and all of a sudden, like, you guys have to see me just basically just leaning over, trying not to scream, because screaming just makes it worse. No, Rat Eye, they don't think it's gum disease. It was an infection. It was an infection over right here. Almost an abscess. And the bad thing about it was the abscess was located directly underneath one of my teeth. And so every time I closed now I have had an abscess before. I had an abscess in my foot. I nearly lost my foot over it. When I was 17, I looked down at my foot one day and I was like, wow, my right foot is a lot more red than my left. Like, it's red, And I went to sleep, and then the next morning when I woke up, my right foot was almost twice the size of my left foot. But this was basically what that was. It was an abscess. And it was doing a lot of basically horrific things. I couldn't do anything. That is why I called off shenanigans. And there are times where I sit there and I'm like, oh, I should have done this tonight. I should have done this live stream. I should have recorded this. I should have done this. I don't regret calling off shenanigans because I try to, have a good time with you guys. I like to try to put off good vibes. And there would have been nothing good if I would have been sitting here and I would have moved my jaw a certain way, or I would have started laughing, and then all of a sudden, because I'll tell you this, when the pain hit, it would hit like an absolute avalanche, a pure tidal wave. And I'm not even sure I would have been able to functionally mute my mic at that point when that stuff hit me, because when I woke up Thursday morning, when I woke up on Friday morning, I woke up from pain. I don't know what I did to cause that level of pain, but I seriously thought I was having a seizure. That's how much pain I was actually in. So that's why I called off shenanigans. Luckily though, it is going away. I am no longer in that massive amount of pain. I don't know, Red Eye. They can't tell me. When I had an abscess in my foot when I was, half the age I am now, over half the age I am now, I asked the same question: how did this happen? And they said this kind of thing can happen to anyone. Unfortunately, though, with what happened up here, I'm hoping, because, not to be graphic about it, but there's no good way to say it. I will probably lose a tooth. Chances are I will lose 2 to 3 over this. Chances are I will lose 2 to 3 over this. And but they're going to be in the back of the mouth, up here in the upper jaw. I'm hoping I don't. I'm hoping everything goes back to normal. It is what it is. Yeah. But If you're wondering why I called off shenanigans, that's why. If you're wondering why my upload schedule, if you're a Patreon or a member and you're wondering why my upload schedule has been kind of sporadic, that has been why. Okay, so enough of that. It's time to hear about cat girls. It's time to hear about war crimes. It's time to have some good times. Not these guys, though. This will suck for them, okay? This will suck for everybody involved in the inner sphere, okay? Guys, it's time. Let's get into it. No cat girls? Russell, that's heresy. Let's get into it. It's time for the first secession war. We are finally out of year 1. Oh my god, let's go. No problem, MN01.
The first year of the Succession Wars had proven itself.
Oh, MN1, what you might want to try, because it helped me out, Listerine gum therapy and hydrogen peroxide solution, half water, half hydrogen peroxide. Just saying.
To be one of the most destructive in the history of the Inner Sphere. Every faction had already made use of weapons of mass destruction, and there was nothing to prevent their continued proliferation. Many invaders had shown zero regard for innocent lives by targeting population centers in an effort to drive out defenders, while other even more contemptible commanders made the killing of civilians an objective in itself. Despite being only a diversionary campaign, the largest battle of the war so far had taken place at Skondia between the Draconis Combine and Lyran Commonwealth.
I haven't heard of that yet,
Archon
Kenneth.
Jennifer Steiner had launched raids deep into Kiritan territory to relieve the pressure on the besieged world. Though Skondia had fallen, the massive damage to the shipyards at the capitals of Dieron and Luthien had proven a humiliation for coordinator Minoru Kurita. Now, the survivors of the Skondia invasion fleet were gearing up for a deep raid of their own against the Commonwealth's largest industrial world, Hesperus. Operation Broken Blade was launched in December 2787. Taisho Pedersen again had command of the fleet, though combat losses had reduced its size almost by half. Furthermore, with the campaign against the Federated Suns now in full swing, he had far fewer supporting units to call on. The ground attack was to be led by 2 of the elite Sword of Light regiments, plus another regular and 1 mercenary command. They were evenly matched by 4 LCAF battlemech regiments and the largest naval flotilla hosted by any non-capital system within the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Confident that he had sufficient ground forces to counter any landing force, Admiral Weisskopf instead focused all his attention on the approaching Draconis Combined Admiralty.
MN01, there's already been weapons of mass destruction used, shipyards have been destroyed, mech facilities have been destroyed. We are in now year 1.1.
To bear
everyone's losing. Edge crush, perfect summation.
Having expected the defenders to make at least some attempts to intercept the dropships, they did not. The lighter Kiritan vessels found themselves dangerously positioned and outgunned.
Kirsten number, how much do I have to super chat so you make a Korinsky lore video? You want to see a 5-ish minute lore on Korinsky? Is that what you're talking about? You want to see a 5-ish minute lore on Korinsky? Oh my god, you guys. I'd have to collaborate with somebody to do that. I'm pretty sure Sven might like that. God, that would be something to see. I'd have to figure out how to actually do that. Tex and Sven on a 5-ish, that would be insane, okay? That would be crazy. The initial engagement
cost them dearly, and it was all they could do to harass the victorious Steiner fleet in an effort to stop them launching orbital strikes of their own. All 4 of the DCMS regiments had made landfall, but the mountainous terrain on Hesperus meant their landing sites were often far from their intended targets. As they entered orbit, they also discovered to their dismay that the Archon had commenced a massive relocation effort for the factories on Weld, moving many either underground or into caverns within the mountains. Focusing instead on the facilities that still remained on the surface, their approach led them into extensive fortifications and weapons emplacements that inflicted brutal losses on the attackers. Only the Sword of Light regiments escaped off-world when Pedersen called for a withdrawal a month later.
Huh.
So ended the First Battle of Hesperus.
And this is the one you guys told me to pay attention to. This is the one you guys told me to pay attention. Okay, so wait a minute, because now my brain is warping. A 5-ish minute lore. Kurita gets spanked round 1. Well, Kurita has been like beating the brakes off of half of everybody they fought. But now I'm thinking about a 5-ish minute lore on Kerensky and how much of a disappointment his children were. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Their raid had resulted in the destruction of the orbital facilities, but what little damage was inflicted to the factories on the surface was repaired within the year. The Draconis Combine would raise the battlemech factories on Sudeten and Yed Posteria the following month, but wouldn't trouble Steiner again for some time. The Tamar Tigers launched their own reprisal raids against Pomme de Terre and Styx, after which the Combine Commonwealth front went quiet for the next year. The Capellans made the last of their strikes against the Corwood Davian worlds around this time, taking Addix, Anka and Smallworld in January 2788. This minor campaign had won them several systems, but cost a pair of mech regiments. The Deneb Light Cavalry had fought hard against their approach, and on several occasions the Seacaf turned to nuclear weapons to clear out defences. They also secured the Terran system of Xi'an, but ousting the nobility resulted in the Loyal Planetary Guard establishing their own mercenary regiment and signing on with the Federated Sons as the Xi'an Hotheads. With the complete takeover of the Clovis combat region, a new border had been established between the Capellan Confederation and Draconis Combine. The former extended an olive branch and proposed a limited alliance, or at least a mutual non-aggression pact. Unfortunately, the Curitans smarted at the fact that several systems in their campaign path had been stolen from right under their noses. The Combine declared that they would only consider an alliance on the condition that Minoru Kurita be acknowledged as First Lord of the Star League.
Really?
They also demanded the Seacaf launch an immediate attack along the Capellan March border.
Hey, Mordric.
The Confederation was not prepared to acquiesce on either request. It would be decades before another offer of truce was made between the successor states. Barbara Liao's main focus remained the reversing of the Free World's invasion of her realm. For the past several months, a massive armada of warships and dropships had been gathering at Cyan, now consisting of over 100 vessels, supported by a dozen aerospace regiments and 12 brigades of mixed ground forces. Commanding this new task force was Colonel Jason Devlin. In late February, the Chancellor gave the order to depart for the League border.
Is it bad that it's been so long since I did a 5-ish minute lore that the second one is mentioned to me about making one about Kerensky that my mind is like literally swimming right now? Is it bad? Or is that a good sign? Because I've been talking about jumping back into lore for a long, long time now. Yeah, Hesperus is Steiner. Which Cameron? Oh god, this would be a lot of lore books. This would be a lot of research. But it would be ridiculously fun once it came out. Yeah.
Captain General Kenyon Malik remained unaware.
This douchebag! Jesus, look at this face! Look at his face!
Coming storm. His forces at the front were still pinned down after the loss of their naval escort. A trio of warships stationed at New Delos were the first to be moved forwards in preparation, something which Mashkarovka agents within the FWLM relayed back to Liao. While a rescue operation was organised, he turned his attention Corwood. Throughout the first 2 months of 2788, Paul Steiner had dispatched the Stealth's mercenary regiment on raids against House Marek, eliminating several major industrial sites at Thermopylae and Wyatt. Later in the year, they were permanently reassigned to Amanda Lestrade's command. The Bolan Thumb allowed Kenyon to manoeuvre forces deep into the Commonwealth, and when they struck at Dwantir in reprisal that March, they used nuclear weapons to obliterate the defenders before they had a chance to escape. These actions would soon be reversed on the civilians of the Free Worlds League tenfold. On the Draconis Fedsons border, First Prince John Davian was taking stock of the calamity that had befallen his nation. The Combine had made massive inroads into the realm. Dozens of regiments were cut off behind the front line, and as the DCMS advanced, garrison forces moved in behind them to finish off the isolated defenders at their leisure. In a desperate attempt to raise new units to help defend the beleaguered state, the premier military academies formed new cadet cadres from their training mechs and rushed them into service with the AFFS.
Christian, I'll tell you what. I am in my 9 to 5. I am currently really, really busy. But once I get done being busy, I'm going to have time to write. And here's how much of a boomer I am. I'm looking for my notebook. I'm looking for my stupid notebook. Where's my notebook? Did she take it with her? She took it with her. Hold on a second. Okay. Rinse. Call the woman, do it live. And man, if I was gonna do a lore video on an entire house, I need to learn a lot more. But I've listened to a lot about Kerensky, and there's a lot of research material about Kerensky, especially his 2 fucking idiot kids, and the fact that the inner sphere immediately did what he said it was going to do. Immediately. Yeah, hold on a second. I already found a way to tie it into 40k, because quite seriously, the inner sphere is acting like a bunch of fucking orcs, extremely incompetent, just throwing themselves at each other and trying to get each other dead. And Kerensky saw it all coming. So Kerensky is quite literally Gazgul Mac Ubruk Thraka, because he is the prophet of the Wa that hit the inner sphere. I'm just saying. Let's go.
Saqqara at the front had mobilized its entire student body out of necessity, while Albion and New Avalon took to reserve roles that allowed more established forces to move forwards. The Curitans had paused their campaign while they geared up for a second wave. They appeared to be waiting for the coordinator to return to the front after he had disappeared to parts unknown earlier in the year. Davian did have a plan to blunt the invasion, however. He had gathered around him some of the most elite forces within his realm, originally with the intention of striking at the Capellan Confederation, but now this force was ready to redeploy against the Curitans. Unfortunately, with the Capellan seizing 9 worlds of their own in recent months, he couldn't afford to leave the Chesterton region undefended. Instead, he siphoned off 3 of his best and paired them with 6 infantry and armour regiments from the Marlet combat region. Operation Solar Shield, as the counterattack would become known, departed for the front line in February. They were ill prepared for what they were about to stumble into. There were just 5 warships in escort, and none of the new task forces had time to train together before they made their assault. The shortage of available warships was a major obstacle for the Federated Suns. That February, the First Prince moved against Terran-aligned Boeing Interstellar to seize the new megaplex at Galax. He could not afford to have this vital facility sitting idle any longer. Control of the new Federated Boeing was given to Euston McCorkindale, making the trusted noble house one of the wealthiest in the Inner Sphere. The pressure was clearly getting to the AFFS High Command, and nowhere is this more apparent than in their ill-conceived decision to launch Operation Brass Ring the following month. The Draconis Combine had tried and failed to destroy the facilities on Hesperus. It had cost them considerably and achieved very little. In a baffling strategic blunder, the Federated Suns decided that they could do better, attacking unprovoked a realm with which they shared no bad blood since the Age of War centuries earlier. Perhaps the hope was to make the Draconis Combine divert some attention against the weakened Lyran Commonwealth.
No!
But the reality was that it served only to divert forces that were desperately needed to hold back the dragon. Only 8
Are they stupid? Are they just stupid? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. What the hell is wrong with them? Hey guys, the Koreans are knee deep in our ass. What are we gonna do, guys?
warships of the Federated Sun's Navy could be found to escort the raiders to Hesperus. When they arrived in late March, they were confronted by the survivors of the prior naval battle. A little over 20.
I don't care, Red Hawk, if you're getting your ass whipped by somebody and they're at war with somebody else who is currently diverting forces away from you, why would you attack the other party that they're at war with? That makes no tactical sense. A ferret high on acid would not make this decision.
20
I don't care if they're not
vessels.
friends.
Rear Admiral Hayes attempted to use speed as his only advantage and was able to open a brief window which allowed a battalion of troops to make landfall after a week of skirmishing in space. The alert had long since gone out though, giving the Hesperus guards more than enough time to muster and quickly dispatch the raiders. The AFFS called off the attack in April, having achieved nothing of note. They lingered in the dark space of the Terran Hegemony for over a year, licking their wounds. Later that month, the CCAF's Task Force Devlin appeared in the New Delos system. They had moved through occupied space without drawing attention to themselves by using cracked codes retrieved by the Mashkarovka. New Delos had been the
One of the biggest tactical blunders in history that I have said, has been the, like, as far as real world history, I would say Napoleon invading Russia, Hitler invading Russia. I would say those are two of the biggest tactical blunders I've ever seen in history. But those pale into insignificance with how stupid that was. That's just dumb. That is just dumb. That is China getting his shit rocked by Japan and then turning around going, you know what? The United States is at war with Japan. I'm going to start shooting at U.S. planes. And then the U.S. be looking over there like, what the fuck are you doing? Christian, as a lore video, I'd accept the Starlink hype vid with half of being cussed out of the current stupidity on. Dude, I got material. Jesus Christ. If they attack and win, is that bad? Yes! Massively! Oh,
where the
it's...
Capellan Confederation and Free Worlds League had put their past grievances to bed at the end of the Second Andurian War. This time, the entire armada descended on the planet, which had only a single green regiment to defend it.
Thank you, Christian. Jesus.
They made landfall
What
around the
the
capital
hell?
city, cutting off any escape routes, then gave those within just 8 hours to surrender the world. They didn't bother to wait for a response and launched mass bombing raids soon after.
Alpha, that wasn't the Lyrans. That was the Federated Suns, who are currently getting their shit rocked by the Koretans. The Koretans are also at war with the Lyrans. So the Federated Suns sit there and we're like, you know what would be a good idea? Let's attack the Lyran Commonwealth. Let's attack the Lyran Commonwealth, who is at war with the Koretans, who are currently beating the hell out of us. What the hell were you thinking? Dude, this is not like Gallipoli. This is dumb. That was stupid.
Approximately 20,000 were killed.
Free-for-all mentality doesn't excuse, like, oh god, it's so dumb. Black Wolf, what's up, man? Tell me how the little one is doing, my guy.
More than 200,000 were wounded.
Orcs would,
The
Captain
Orloff
Commander.
Grenadiers tried to stop the killing, but were themselves wiped out by the overwhelming
Orgar.
Capellan numbers. The orders Colonel Devlin
No
had received
kidding, Raina.
from Barbara Liao left no doubt in his mind what the objective of this raid was. The killing of civilians took priority over the destruction of the various staging posts and supply depots supporting the Marek militia campaign. And yet, however brutal the
Congratulations, Black Wolf, father a second time. Everybody, X in chat for Black Wolf. That is outstanding, my guy. That is outstanding. That is absolutely amazing. I hope the wife is doing great. That is absolutely fantastic. That is absolutely fan-fucking-tastic, my guy. Congratulations. Congratulations to you, to your wife. You like, that kid's already ahead in life. I'm telling you what. That's amazing to hear. War Pugs, we got another War Pug. We got another War Pug in the ranks. That's awesome. That is outstanding. That's awesome, my guy. That just put me in a good mood for the rest of the day.
The true horror of the
I've been waiting for you to message me about that, bud.
Realized in the nearby Stuart commonality. Awesome. In early May 2788, a pair of warships appeared in the Helm system.
I do apologize, Black Wolf, for watching stupidity right now. We're watching incompetence on display, okay?
Escorting a mech regiment of the Draconis Combine Mustered Soldiery. With them was the missing coordinator, Minoru Kirita. Most of the Stuart Dragoons had long since been redeployed to the Capellan front, leaving
this
only
is
a small
Battletech.
militia force in garrison. They alerted the defenders to their presence when they launched a nuclear weapon at the forces camped at Fort Albert.
I think they're aware you're there now. The mushroom cloud might have given it away.
But on the 11th of May, what followed was a brutal campaign against the survivors and civilian population as the Draconis Combine searched frantically for the SLDF secret base within the Nagayan Mountains. Nothing was off limits if it resulted in the discovery of the hidden cache. Civilians were rounded up, interrogated and tortured in an effort to locate it. Eventually, their lack of success led them to detonate a nuclear weapon within the capital, Freeport. By the 28th, the DTMS was pulling back, having determined that the weapons cache had either been emptied by the FWLM or the SLDF before them, or was simply a myth. As the Taisho departed for orbit, he contacted the coordinator to inform him that they had failed to locate the secret base. Minoru's response was to order his fleet to chastise the local population for their lack of assistance. Olav Nansen gave the order and began the Ghost Rain Protocol. Their full arsenal of nuclear ordnance and naval batteries was unleashed on Helm's major population centers. In less than an hour, approximately 10 million civilians were killed, the greatest loss of life since the New Vandenberg campaign during the Reunification War, a battle that had raged for many months. In the
Yeah, we need to... I swear, Karita doesn't make any sense. Thank you, Christian. Orcs when they see Battletech. Oi! Them gits got plenty of stompers, but too much pocket, son. These humies are bigger gits than all humies. To be fair, Battletech would eradicate the orcs. For live fire training. Dude, I don't know about that. I think the orcs would get along just fine with Battletech because the stompas, like, the orcs would be like, they would see an Atlas and be like, I'm gonna put a face on that. Just saying. Dude, why would they ever forget? Thank you, Christian. Dude, this is ridiculous. This is utter stupidity. This doesn't even make sense.
In the subsequent years, a further 60 million civilians perished in the nuclear winter, and another 20 million were displaced by the carnage. In May of 2788, it was unquestionably one of the greatest atrocities in human history. By year's end, those numbers would be almost insignificant.
Oh, that's just fucking perfect.
Back in the Federated Suns, Operation Solar Shield was getting underway. It began with the botched assault on Elbar that May. Upon arrival, they failed to locate any hostile naval presence, and so began their burn towards orbit, only for a Combine warship to suddenly appear behind them and destroy their jump ships. The stranded dropships transferred as much of their material into their escort as possible, before cruising straight past their target, abandoning their vessels, and jumping out in the days that followed. Shadar was an even greater disaster.
Kerensky was
While the
right.
two Vincent-class corvettes engaged each other, the DCA destroyers completely ignored the incoming fire from the remaining escort warship to focus on the approaching dropships. Yet another AFFS regiment was destroyed before even making landfall, as were the naval elements soon after.
Okay, Free Worlds League, you are batting like if the Free Worlds League was looking at successes as in a batting average, they would get cut from a church softball team for special needs children. Okay? This is how bad they're doing right now.
To help pull some of the attention away from the Terran end of the front, John Davian had ordered those forces who had retreated deeper into the Fairfax combat region to instead squeeze the Curitan advance from the other end. The final target in the ill-fated Operation Solar Shield was Cartago, where the strength of Alexander were making landfall in early June. With them was the First Prince himself. A pair of warships served as escort for the assault force, and were able at first to drive off their opposite number from the Draconis Combine Admiralty. The Davian Guards descended to secure the capital's spaceport, but found it strangely deserted. The ships around them were civilian designs, not military as they had first appeared. They were also in serious disrepair.
He's gonna die.
The mystery resolved itself when the Draconis Combine remote detonated a nuclear weapon hidden among the vessels. John Davian's saving grace was that the detonation was somewhat premature, and only a company of mechs were caught in the explosion. It had nonetheless shaken his composure, and he ordered his regiment back to their dropships when they detected a large aerospace fighter force on fast approach. At the same time, a trio of Curitan destroyers now moved around the planet to engage their escort and cut off their exit. Miraculously, the First Prince was able to escape the system alive, but only thanks to a holding action that lost him yet another warship. Operation Solar Shield was an unmitigated disaster for the Federated Suns. If there was any silver lining at all, it was that the field marshals at Fairfax had actually managed to liberate most of their combat region. Elsewhere, the best victory they could claim was the death of the Coordinator's cousin Vincent Curita, whose claim to the New Avalon throne had begun the War of Davian Succession half a century earlier.
Perfect.
The main Combine advance continued unabated, however. In less than 2 years, the Draconis March had been halved in size. By the end of 2788, more than 25 regiments had been destroyed by the Curitan tidal wave, almost a quarter of their pre-war strength.
And you attack the Lyran Commonwealth. And you attack the Lyran Commonwealth when this is happening to you. That's bad. I said this was bad from the outset when the Federated Suns legitimately, they had 3 major areas of control that were held, and they pretty much gave up one of them. That's how big the invasion was. Their grand strategy was, let's launch a fleet and an army across the galaxy to fight the Lyran Commonwealth, who is also at war with the people who are turning my fucking territory into food coloring. This is absolutely stupid, and I have lost all respect for the Davians.
A few battalion-sized units had...
Doesn't matter, XJ. That would be like me. That would be like me fighting Mike Tyson in his prime, and then turning around and slapping Fedor Emelianenkovic's wife's ass. Because now I'm just gonna get pounded. I'm already getting my ass whipped.
formed behind enemy lines on Dobson, Franklin, and New Roads, and miraculously, Colonel Michael Barlow's battalion was still fighting on Cussor, as were some of the survivors on Galtor, despite being 2 of the first worlds hit. The Dragon now sat directly on the border of the Crucis March. This region of space had not seen combat since the Davian Civil War 2.5 centuries earlier. It had seemed unthinkable that another realm would ever push so far into their territory. Morale across the military was absolutely shot. And unfortunately for House Davian, Kirita was only just getting started.
Of course.
Earlier in the year, Jerome Blake had returned from his voyage with promises from each of the successor lords to respect Comstar's neutrality.
Okay.
The conditions of the Communications Protocol of 2787 were already being enforced across the Inner Sphere. Back on March 13th, he had outlined his plans for a revised Operation Silver Shield. The situation in the Terran hegemony was more dire than ever. Though it was only a suspicion at the time, documents recovered in the years since prove that both Minoru Kirita and Kenya Malik were already making plans for an assault on Terra. Blake had strengthened his forces by approaching mercenaries of SLDF vintage and offering them spare parts stockpiles, but he now called for his full power. Operation Silver Shield began on June 25th at 0600 Terra Standard Time. Every hyperpulse generator within the Sol system suddenly went dark, and this soon spread to the entire network, cutting off all interworld communications. Without a means to contact their neighbours, nobody realised this was anything more than a local failure and not a deliberate act. This
Pay your bill, fucko.
shutdown was timed to coincide with the arrival of former SLDF troops on Terra. Comstar had secretly organised its forces into 8 expeditionary brigades under the command of General Lauren Hayes. Their first targets were the space defence system emplacements, securing the world against all but the largest hostile fleets. The small garrisons maintained by each successor state were promptly disarmed. Only the AFFS garrison at Berlin resisted for 5 hours. Elsewhere in the Sol system, the warships Comstar had hidden quickly brought the other planets and facilities under their control. With Comstar and Blake in particular viewed in such a favourable light by the Terrans, the government welcomed the takeover. The only stubborn resistance Hayes faced was a pair of former SLDF divisions that refused to go along with their orders. Operating out of the Manaus Castle Bryan, they fought for 3 days until the 1st and 5th Comstar Expeditionary Division were able to overrun their position. The HPGs came back online on the 28th, carrying a...
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate it. Space AT&T has one message for all your houses. Pay your bills. Sponsored by the Military Industrial Complex. Also by Milcom Plus, 50% less static. And it has vitamins. Thank you, Christian.
message across the Inner Sphere, informing them of the events on Earth. Terra had been claimed as a Comstar protectorate. The successor lords reacted with indignation, claiming that Comstar had violated its own neutrality. Unfortunately for them, with the First Succession War...
I'm sorry, not a single one of you has any right to complain about anything at all, for any reason whatsoever, especially not Kirita.
In full swing, they would need the continued support of the HPG network in order to complete their own campaigns before they could divert sufficient
Amish are revolting,
Terra
yes,
as their own. The original plan for Operation Silver Shield had called for Comstar to take control of all of the Hegemony core worlds, but Blake wisely saw that this would surely provoke a hostile reaction.
Yeah.
Instead, the Comstar Expeditionary Divisions moved to New Earth on July 3rd and began to dismantle the former Regular Army headquarters there. By the time they left a week later, there was nothing of use left.
Huh.
This would be the last time Comstar took overt military action in the First Succession War.
Okay.
They spent the next few decades securing their position politically on Terra, while trying to make themselves less of a target for the successor states by
So basically, Comstar is playing the long game right now. They're going to let everybody swing it out. They're going to turn Earth into a massive fortress that nobody can even come close to worrying about. They're turning Earth into Cadia.
commissioning their naval yards and secreting their many weapon stockpiles somewhere on Earth.
It's a very good idea, Red Eye.
Hunting for hidden Starleague caches was becoming a popular pastime for every major house. The Draconis
What are we dealing with here? A bunch of idiot house lords who are basically Trazen the Infinite?
Combine had left Helm empty-handed, but they weren't the only ones searching within the Free Worlds League for one of Kerensky's abandoned stockpiles. In July, the armed forces of the Capellan Confederation and Lyran Commonwealth both dispatched a pair of regiments to the former provincial capital, Tirfing. The planet had been heavily scarred during the Civil War, and over the ensuing decade, over 1 billion civilians had emigrated off-world. Nevertheless, the ruined Castles Brian likely still housed valuable supplies and equipment, making it a priority target. Rumours suggested that Madoc was trying to bring the space defense system back into operation, which gave them additional urgency to strike sooner rather than later. The defending regiment excelled in ambush tactics, inflicting a heavy toll on the raiders. However, with 4-to-1 odds, there could be little hope of victory, even if the attackers were occasionally forced to fight each other. Colonel Sullivan sent out a call for reinforcements. To buy themselves time, the Marek militia turned to weapons of mass destruction, particularly—
Oh wow! Imagine my shock. I am in utter shock at this point that they would resort to WMDs right out of the gate.
Favouring chemical weapons recovered from the ruins.
Oh.
This devastated the conventional forces deployed to Tirfing, turning the campaign into an all-battle mech affair. Orient SR reinforcements arrived in the following weeks, but the situation soon became even more convoluted. Desperate to find anything that might help them turn the tide against the Kiritan onslaught, a Davian raiding party touched down in August. Their sizable infantry complement faced immediate disaster when they disembarked into a radioactive and poisoned hellscape. Task Force Devlin's attack on New Delos had threatened to severely weaken the strong ties between House Madoc and House Allison. The Grand Duchy of Orient had been their strongest and most loyal supporter, but the Captain General's inability to defend one of his own systems from the Capellan attacks, coupled with his need for the Duchy to send its own units into occupied space, was a bad look for Kenyan Madoc in Parliament. He now sought vengeance against Liao, beginning with the orbital bombardment
You invaded him, you asshole!
of Ingersoll in July. The primary target was the dropship assembly yards, but the destruction soon spread to the popular holiday and tourist beaches nearby. Worse followed at New Canton in August. The Madoc flotilla did not land any forces to take the planet, just simply bombarded the major military, industrial, and residential districts from space. The following month, they went after the supply depots at Outreach, and then conducted another firebombing campaign against Hull in November. Civilian deaths were in the hundreds of thousands, but that was barely a drop in the ocean compared to what the Inner Sphere was about to bear witness to. Back in October, the chaotic battle raging on Tirfing reached another level. With the arrival of the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery, Tirfing became the only time in history that a 5-way battle had been fought between each of the successor states. In a notable twist of fate, 2 former units of the Rimwell's Republic would battle against one another, the Black Sharks and the Stealths. In December, fighting intensified as the 11 regiments closed on the Great Crystal Valley, one of the greatest natural wonders of the Inner Sphere, site of towering phosphorescent crystals as large as glaciers. Whole battalions would vanish into underground warrens, caves, and Star League bunkers scattered across the region, never to re-emerge.
Sweet.
Alliances were formed and broken on an hourly basis.
Nice.
2 whole regiments were destroyed across the 6-day battle, and the crystal formations that predated humanity itself were trampled into dust. What little of value was found barely compensated for the material lost in its acquisition. The fighting continued into February 2789, at which point the survivors all pulled back. Another of the Terran Hegemony's jewels had been thoroughly despoiled. The profligate use of nuclear and particularly chemical weapons had left it virtually uninhabitable. Tirfing had suffered at the hands of Amaris during the Civil War, but the SLDF campaign had kept the use of WMDs to military targets primarily. The same was not true of the First Succession War.
Here comes Kerensky with a chair. No. Kerensky called this. He said this was going to happen. This is exactly what he was worried about. Because every single one of the noble houses was acting like a bunch of children. I just didn't think, like, when you guys told me that this was going to be bad, I was sitting there thinking, there's it's going to have some tactical sense. This is just petty rivalries, cheap shots, and just blowing stuff up for no fucking reason. The Inner Sphere are space orcs. I'm just saying, the Inner Sphere are space orcs. Flat out, no kidding. That's what's happening.
Less than 8 million civilians.
Black Wolf. Thank you, by the way, Christian. Appreciate it, bud. I really do appreciate it. Black Wolf, we'd had to talk about that off when I'm not sitting here looking at this horror show. I'm just saying, bud.
Had survived to see the great houses depart. The final death toll, 1.6 billion.
That's a B.
The blockade of Inglesmond had been going on for almost 2 years. It remained one of the most economically viable systems within the Terran hegemony, but the situation on the ground was dire. The Combine hoped to starve the government into submission and claim the industrious planet for themselves. The inhabitants did not want to give up their freedoms to the draconian House Kurita, but things were getting desperate. A request for aid went out to both the Federated Suns and Lyran Commonwealth, promising to join their realm in exchange for assistance in repulsing the dragon.
Which one's going to destroy the planet? Which one's going to nuke it? That's the question. The Koreans would do it because it's fucking Sunday. The Steiners would do it because, for some reason, they get confused and think it was the Federated Suns. And the Free Worlds League would do it because it's their own fucking planet.
Neither was in any position to help, but saw an opportunity to deny the Kuritans another valuable system. When they arrived, their objective was simply asset denial. Inglesmond watched in horror as the troops that they believed had come to save them instead unleashed an array of nuclear weapons against them and any DCMS targets of opportunity. The enraged Combine responded in kind, leading to a cataclysmic fallout on the ground.
Never mind!
When the dust settled and the Kuritans looked at what the battle had won them, they found nothing but ash. Of the once 4.25 billion people that had called Inglesmond home, barely 10,000 anguished souls were left. 2788 is the year where the First Succession War passes beyond easy comprehension. The Star League Civil War, which just a decade earlier was the bloodiest conflict ever fought, was now nothing but a prologue to the apocalypse which had been unleashed by the successor states. In 2 years, or on just one planet in the case of Inglesmond, more people had been killed in combat than in the entire 100,000 years of human history. And in the eyes of House Davian and Steiner High Command, that was a successful raid. The carnage being wrought all along their borders had so desensitized them to the use of weapons of mass destruction that the extermination of billions was now nothing but an unfortunate but necessary act to deny their true rival a valuable asset.
I told you guys that the Battletech might be a 40k precursor.
(2788) also marked the end for the Terran hegemony. When Comstar took over control of Terra and made no provision for the governance of other neighbouring systems, the former Cameron worlds found themselves without a home nation. The effects were similar to the demarcation declaration that followed the Outer Reaches rebellion half a millennia earlier. It would take a few more years for all of them to be subsumed into one of the successor states, but for all intents and purposes, the Terran hegemony was dead.
F in chat for the hegemony. It's dead. It's gone. This is always a really good sign when the chapter is called Sins of the Fathers.
In the opening weeks of 2789, Kiritan troops began pouring into the Kestrel and Marlette combat regions within the Crucis March.
Hey, Free Worlds League, I got a great idea. Why don't you attack... Federated Sons, I got a great idea. Why don't you attack the Taurians while you're at it and piss them off?
Warlord Jinjiro's invasion had already taken 60 worlds from the Federated Sons,
Good
making
God!
it the most successful campaign of the First Succession War so far. To assist in their continued advance, a handful of major supply depots were established in recently occupied systems to reduce travel times. The armed forces of the Federated Sons, who had suffered more losses than all the other successor states combined, were powerless to stop them at this phase of the war. In the neighbouring Capellan Confederation, Colonel Devlin was preparing to depart from Propus for another brutal strike against the Grand Duchy of Orient, this time at Callaway. His task force had been restructured and now included the vaunted Ares Titans and Red Lancers, within which served the Chancellor's sons, Balthazar and Barnabas. In a move that greatly worried the Capellan nobility, Barbara herself would also accompany her sons. Unfortunately for House Liao, SAFE had many agents operating within the Propus system, and they kept the Free Worlds well informed of the developing situation. They didn't yet know where they would strike, but they divided the Navy's Third Fleet accordingly, and reserve units were moved forwards. When Task Force Devlin began moving in February, they awaited the call to reinforce whatever system they appeared in. As it happened, their target Callaway was garrisoned by a quartet of provincial regiments and the 1st Orient Provincial Squadron.
Right-eye SAFE is the Free Worlds League's intelligence apparatus.
The following month, the Free Worlds League launched what they hoped would be a decisive blow against the industrial capacity of House Steiner. Kenyon Marek's younger son Thaddeus had recently been promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the entire Lyran front. He was looking to make a name for himself and believed he had an opportunity in Hesperus.
Again?
Approximately 1/3 of the Commonwealth's mech production took place within the massive factories on planet. Their continued operation allowed Steiner to expand the 2nd Lyran Guards Division to full strength, with one of the new regiments given to the Archon's son Richard. Reviewing the prior battles, he concluded that Kirita and Davian had tried to have their cake and eat it by landing ground forces tasked with both the destruction of the facilities and with seizing spare parts. The 3rd Battle of Hesperus would instead be an all-naval affair. Thaddeus's fleet would engage the defenders and break off a pair of mass driver-equipped cruisers to strike at the factories from orbit. His battle plan also called for his navy to materialize at a pirate point near the system's first planet, limiting the time Hesperus had to organize a defense. The strategy appeared to pay off when the Free Worlds League Navy successfully arrived at the dangerous pirate point without incident, but fate was about to throw a spanner into the works. Arriving just days after Marek, Fleet Admiral Dewey of the Commonwealth Navy had come to relieve Weisskopf of Hesperus's defense. When he discovered the raid in progress, an immediate in-system jump took the pair of Lyran cruisers directly into orbit, just as the battle commenced. They were perfectly positioned to intercept the Soil-class vessels assigned to ground assault. After a broadside nearly destroyed his flagship, Dewey ordered his cruiser to ram the nearest vessel, dragging both down into the atmosphere. The other hostile Soil was destroyed soon after. With the attack faltering, Thaddeus Marek was forced to call for a retreat or risk losing the remainder of his fleet. Hesperus had been an embarrassing defeat for Kenyon's son, but he would go some way to repairing his reputation with the successful strike against the Dassault Shimon shipyards at New Earth later in the year, destroying the orbital facility just months after it had fallen into Lyran hands. While this 3rd battle would mark the last major raid against Hesperus during the First Succession War, it wasn't the end of the troubles for those on world. A guerrilla force known as Macreadam's Devils had formed in the mountains from survivors of the 52nd Heavy Assault Regiment, the ex-SLDF mercenaries who had participated in the Kiritan assault.
Christian, thank you, bud. If Battletech is in the Warhammer universe, the Emperor would have stopped this and would have brought Kentares back. Also, no aliens in Battletech, only humans to blame. I still will find a way to blame the Tau, Christian. I still will find a way to blame the Tau. You can mark me on that. If the Emperor was here, though, the Emperor pretty much stayed in the shadows until, like, the 30th millennium. He pretty much stayed in the shadows and let things happen. For the most part. Red Eye, the better question is, how are the Tau not to be blamed? Okay? Thank you. Thank you, Christian. I appreciate it, bud. Yeah, the Imp is napping. He was probably running Comstar, I'm saying.
They had been disrupting operations on World for the past year, and it would take 2 more before the last of them were finally hunted down by the Hesperus guards. Not to be outdone by the Free Worlds League, the Draconis Combine staged their own raid against Steiner's Port Mosby, savaging the defenders and forcing the Lyran guards to have to rebuild their regiment from scratch. Thankfully, with Hesperus still operating at capacity, they were able to do this in short order.
At this point, Hesperus has been attacked 3 times by 3 separate powers. It's time to fortify the hell out of it.
Within the newly conquered territory of the Draconis Combine, Warrant's chargers found themselves behind enemy lines. They hatched a daring plan to destroy one of the staging posts Jinjiro was using to support his advance. They launched their raid on March 23rd, timed to coincide with a parade the Kiritans were performing in front of the media and news crews of half a dozen realms. When the attack began, cameras from across the inner sphere were there to see it. The chargers drew the Combine mechs into the morass of stockpiled weapons, a place where any stray shot risked a massive chain reaction. Captain Warrant perished in the attack, but half his unit escaped. By then, more than 1,000 tons of munitions had gone up in smoke, and 2 companies of the DCMS forces had been caught in the raging inferno. It was the first real blow the Federated Sons had dealt House Kirita.
It's about
the material damage, though great, was insignificant compared to the effects on troop morale. In the aftermath, the Combine relocated that supply depot to Kentares 4. In March 2789, Task Force Devlin materialized at Callaway's Zenith jump point. The Orient Provincial Squadron immediately engaged them with a suicidal charge. While the majority of the fleet was still appearing around them, the half-dozen House Allison warships dove into the quagmire and targeted as many transport vessels as possible, destroying a full regiment of aerospace fighters and battle mechs before their inevitable demise. On approach to the planet, the transports were again intercepted by large numbers of enemy fighters and dropships, which eliminated a further 2 regiments. The CCAF still had a slight numbers advantage as the ground campaign commenced, but they were hampered by an overzealous Barbara Liao who insisted on taking to the field personally, despite her lack of combat experience. This forced Devlin to deploy more conservatively than he would have liked, and things soon turned against him.
Of course.
By the 10th day, the Red Lancers had lost 2 battalions, and the rest of the task force were in a similarly sorry state.
Good job.
Barbara reluctantly called for a withdrawal, and the survivors headed to their dropships. It was at this point they discovered that their entire
Alright, Black Wolf, you have a nice night, bud.
jumpship detachment had been wiped out by the arriving Marik fleet out at the Zenith. Devlin ordered a half-dozen warships to break off and escort the Chancellor to safety, while he led the remainder of the fleet to engage the Free Worlds League Navy head-on.
Boy.
Of the 24 vessels that battled the Marik ships, just 6 made it out the other side, while the Free Worlds Admiral lost a dozen of their own in the exchange. Jason Devlin himself was killed when his flagship was struck by a number of nuclear missiles. The Callaway debacle resulted in serious ramifications for Barbara Liao, both professional and personal. She had lost the support of both her government and the Strategios, the Armed Forces High Command.
The Strategios? So we're mixing China and Byzantine Empire. Okay, I like it.
Furthermore, she had lost both her sons. The Confederation transitioned into a defensive posture in the months that followed. Crucially, they were forced to abandon their blockade of the Marik militia on Kori and Wazan, but not quickly enough to prevent the destruction of several more warships,
and Russian?
in turn allowing the Eagle to resume his drive towards Sana. Kenyon's primary goal was to strengthen one of his closest supporters, House Orloff. The Duke of Carbonus had been living in exile within the Grand Duchy of Orient since the Age of War.
Okay.
They now prepared for a homecoming. Taking first the planet Orenson, destroying a Tikhonov regiment in the process, a trio of FWLM units next descended on Carbonus itself. The Seacap and Merksing garrison were eliminated, and the Duke restored to his position. The Duchy of Orloff had expanded to include 4 new systems since the war began, helping them to raise an additional 2 regiments. 2 months after Callaway, Kenyon Matic sent the Chancellor a mocking letter, claiming that he was coming for Andurian next. The Strategios was not fooled by the ruse and continued to fortify those worlds along his path to Sana. The Free Worlds League military was just as active on the Lyran front, targeting first the system of Murdin off the Bolan Thumb. Both sides used nuclear and chemical weapons extensively during the 5-month campaign,
Of course.
meaning it was somewhat of a hollow victory for Matic. To strengthen their control of the region, they hired on the mysterious Dark Spirits. This mercenary outfit had suddenly appeared within the Free Worlds and kept quiet about their history. We know now that they were actually the survivors of Darabont's Damned, a mercenary regiment that had fled the Amaris Empire in the final days of the Star League Civil War. Elsewhere on the front, the Free World seized Alula Australis in July. The Lyrans launched a retaliatory raid straight away against the Bolan defenders on Kamens. Unbeknownst to them, stationed on World was Kenyon Matic's oldest son, Carl.
Oh boy.
The heir to the Free Worlds League would become an unintentional casualty of the raid, leaving his own son, Jason Matic, as Kenyon's successor.
This is getting to be 40k levels of air replacement. I'm just saying, this is getting noble house levels of air replacement. I'm just saying, why would you put your heir there? There! Nothing will happen to my boy. He's
September,
a good lad.
The Lyran Commonwealth again came under attack from the Federated Suns. The remnants of the Second Battle of Hesperus, led by Admiral Hayes, first appeared within the Thorin system, where they caused
You're getting your shit ran by the Caretans. Focus on the Caretans, my guy. Focus on the Caretans. The Lyrans aren't giving you problems. You can lose Calf. You can lose it. Just let it go. Just let it the hell go. Stop pissing off the Lyrans. Fight the Caretans. They're beating you to death right now.
as much damage to infrastructure as they could from orbit before departing. The stealths were known to be operating in the region, which prevented the AFFS from landing any forces. They next struck at Rocky, where upon arrival they discovered that the LCAF on World were in the midst of a manhunt for a rebel group of Amaris Empire armed forces. While
Christian, do you think... Thank you, Christian. Do you think the SLDF could have just been neutral and protected the Terran hegemony? At least nobles in Battletech fight. It seems like Warhammer nobles do not so anything. Some nobles in 40k do fight. Some really, really do. There are some... There's actually a great amount of noble houses that will have many generals come out of there. Most of the officers in the Imperium, especially the high-ranking ones, are from noble families. And it does depend on the question of 40. It does depend on the planet in question for 40k. But I think if the SLDF was still in the Terran hegemony and was trying to maintain the Terran hegemony, somebody would have nuked it to the fucking ground by now. I'm just saying. Like, the SLDF was very strong at this point, but it would be like trying to hold back a tidal wave with a dump truck. I mean, honestly, with what I've heard so far, this is not an organized war so much as it is just a flat-out barroom brawl with nukes. That's what's going on here. That's what's going on. Yeah, exactly, X. If the SLDF stayed, it would have actually been worse, because that would have given all the noble houses a target, and what happened in that 5-way war would have happened again on world after world after world after world. And if the Terran hegemony had already been burnt to the ground by the Star League Civil War, what would have come next would have been, there wouldn't have been a habitable world in the entirety of the rest of the Terran hegemony. It would have been done.
When Steiner engaged each other, the Amaris loyalists struck at the Lyran headquarters, prompting a nuclear response.
Yeah, epic.
Hayes in orbit responded in kind, and soon the planet was plunged into a nuclear winter.
Of course it was.
The exact death toll on Rocky isn't known. The last census, taken in 2765 before the fall of the Star League, reported a population of 2.25 billion. Despite the mass exodus that followed the Civil War, it's probable that Rocky's population still numbered well over 1 billion, most of whom would perish in the crossfire. On the final leg of their return to the Federated Suns, the last of the task force destroyed the Dytron Heavy Industrials orbital shipyards within the New Earth system, rendering useless the second of the 2 facilities Steiner had been so pleased to acquire. These minor victories were of little consolation to the collapsing Federated Suns. Throughout 2789, Jinjiro's advance had proven completely unstoppable. They abandoned early the defense of the Kestrel and the Marlet combat regions, and instead spent the year frantically fortifying the systems around their national capital. Those forces at the front tried in vain to hold their ground, but another 2 regiments were destroyed, and by year's end, the mustered soldiery were preparing to move into the new Avalon combat region. In their desperation, the Federated Suns launched a special operation that would become known as the Church Expedition. Departing from Pitkin in September, Church led his quintet of jump ships through
We're not getting beat bad enough. We're not getting beat bad enough. We're not getting beat bad enough. Let's pick a fight with another power.
through the Outworlds Alliance and out into distant space. Their goal was to pick up the trail of Alexander Kerensky and somehow convince him to return so that he might aid the beleaguered Davian worlds. For months, they traced the path of jettisoned refuse, along the way discovering several distant colonies who had sighted the commanding general on his pilgrimage, including one of the former staging sites for the Rimworld secret army on Gutara.
JR, you didn't see what they did to the Caretans. It was actually kind of embarrassing. The Caretans had to essentially start bombarding worlds from orbit, which was the worst thing that anybody had seen up until this whole shit show kicked off.
130 light years further on, the trail finally turned cold. They had been searching for 2 years by this point, and their supplies were near exhausted. Defeated, the Commodore led his flotilla back home, unsure if the Federated Suns even still existed.
Exactly, X.
In 2789, the first cracks appeared in the logistic and transport departments of the Innosphere militaries. Unlike today, where they are strictly off limits, jump ships during the First Succession War were priority targets. The numbers available to the frontline commanders were swiftly depleting. To help maintain their offensives, civilian and commercial vessels were commandeered. The Lyran Commonwealth led the way in this practice. By the end of the year, approximately 50% of their merchant fleet was now operated by the LCAF. Other states soon followed their example. This had terrible knock-on effects.
Oh boy.
Many colonies that were relying on trade and supply runs to survive found themselves starving and without a means to escape the system.
Of course!
Perhaps the most infamous example of this occurred in the system then known as Dunkelwälder Dunkelflüsse Schattenfeld. A decision to redesignate the unwieldy planetary name came at a time when systems were being struck off star maps as various cataclysms befell their worlds. Despite being far removed from the worst of the fighting, the people of Bob inadvertently caused their own downfall, as vital food shipments were no longer dispatched in their direction.
Oh yay, Planet Bob.
Population of 346 million were sentenced to an excruciatingly slow death by starvation, with over 250 million succumbing by war's end. In the modern era, less than 1 million people eke out a living on the surface of this inhospitable planet. One minor battle of Jinjiro's campaign that would have a lasting impact on the Inner Sphere took place on Imbrial 3. Fighting for the planet had turned especially ugly, and facing the brunt of it were the Longhorns Mercenary Regiment.
Okay.
They felt their employer, the Draconis Combine, was using them as cannon fodder.
Oh, really? Oh, hold on a second, guys. Funny lore, the Federated Sons have their version of the Catholic Church due to a miscommunication in the Civil War. You can have a Pope Atlas with... Christian, that's actually pretty good. Guys, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. I gotta go say hey to somebody. Okay, there we go. Sorry, guys. All right, let's go.
Sending them on ever more dangerous assignments so that they wouldn't be alive to draw pay at the end of the campaign.
Thank you, Christian.
This prompted the Longhorns
populist...
to switch sides.
Stop it,
bringing
Epic!
the Department of Military Intelligence a wealth of information on the Kuritan battle plans. Quick to see an opportunity...
The Kuritan battle plans. Beat the crap out of the Federated Sons. Be the only people in the Inner Sphere doing anything approaching being competent.
In the fallout was Comstar. In 2789, they founded the Mercenary Review Board. Employers and mercs could use them as a neutral arbitrator in an effort to ensure fair treatment.
Okay.
They only requested a modest 5% of the payment in exchange. In the centuries since its creation, reputable mercenaries have insisted on involving Comstar in any contract negotiations, giving the Terran organization significant insights and influence on where mercenaries are deployed.
Oh.
With the successor states effectively forced to use sea-bills to pay for both their communications and military spending, the soft power of Jerome Blake and Comstar continued to grow.
The Amish are taking over. The Amish are taking over right now, guys. It is happening. It is happening. Oh my goodness. With that kind of knowledge, thank you. With that kind of knowledge, Comstar would be in a position to quite literally know who was building up to attack who, when, where, and why. Christian, yeah, Space State TNT, Armed Goon Services, pay that bill. Yeah, they would be in a position, because if you know, with the way that everything works in the Inner Sphere, if you know who's hiring mercenaries, you know who's about to attack who. If you know where they're hiring mercenaries, you know where the attack is going. And that allows you to hedge your bets. Comstar would have made a fortune over this.
This did not go unnoticed by the successor lords, and by late 2789, Kenya Marik had almost completed preparing for a strike on Terra. Throughout the year, the Free World's guards had been building up a massive stockpile of munitions on Procyon ahead of the attack. At this crucial moment, an unknown raiding force arrived on World and launched a precision strike against the depot, destroying thousands of tons of supplies, then departed as swiftly as they had arrived. The loss of those vital supplies in the region made continuing with the invasion of Terra and assault on Comstar a foolhardy maneuver.
Unknown.
Nobody has ever claimed responsibility for the raid.
We all know.
Throughout 2789, Davian had been gathering their naval strength in preparation of a major counter-offensive against Kurita. Making up their numbers was half of New Avalon's own defense fleet. By year's end, over 100 warships pulled from the Capellan and Taurian borders had assembled at Arcadia, including the flagship of their entire navy, FSS Golden Lion. The purpose of this armada was not to liberate the captured systems, but to destroy as much of the Curitan navy as possible.
That's a good idea.
Without jump ships and warships to move the troops around, Jinjiro's advance would surely peter out. The fleet began by dividing itself between Admiral Kenneth Jones and Vice Admiral Marjorie Stone.
This is actually the first smart move the Federated Sons have done in this war. This is the first intelligent maneuver.
Each would cut a path deep into occupied territory, cause what destruction they could inside of a week or two, drop supplies for any resistance movements they encountered, and then move on to their next target before Kurita could mount an effective response.
This is smart.
After hitting their initial objectives, they would regroup at deserted Shalam, before heading for resupply at Rosamond. To coordinate their actions, each flagship was equipped with an extremely rare mobile HPG, 2 of just a handful still in operation post-Exodus.
This is actually smart, okay? This is actually intelligent. This is actually okay. I don't have any anger issues towards this. Lee, thank you, bud. Fun fact, it's been speculated by some that Merc attacks on important technology listed as Merc raids may have been, in fact, Comstar posing as Mercs. Lee, whatever would make you think that? Comstar is the friendly neighborhood Amish on Terra. Why in the world would they launch attacks against any of the great houses? They're a peaceful people. They're a peaceful people just trying to get by in the world that has just lost its mind. They just want people to be able to communicate and talk to their grandma and grandpa. That's what's going on. No, the only peace the town deserve is the peace of a nuclear winter, okay?
Counterattack began in the first week of 2790 and met with early success. 6 Curitan warships were destroyed in the first 2 months at the cost of 4 Davian vessels.
Jeez.
Better, they had captured one of the now rare Savetsky Soyuz class heavy cruisers.
Okay.
Furthermore, 22 jump ships and 25 dropships were destroyed,
Ooh.
to only 4 and 8 of their own. Curiously, they had yet to encounter any significant concentrations of the Dracona's Combine Admiralty, but their massive fleets would no doubt make short work of any squadrons they stumbled upon, especially once they regrouped at Shalam. Admiral Jones was the first to arrive at the meeting point on March 9th. When he appeared at the system's zenith, he quickly realized that something was amiss.
Oh boy.
The Department of Military Intelligence had reported no Combine targets at Shalam, but the information had been fabricated by an ISF double agent who was obscuring the system's actual purpose as a staging ground for the DCA fleet.
Oh boy.
Awaiting them at Shalam was a Curitan armada of more than 100 warships. While Jones's fleet was only arriving in dribs and drabs, Taisho Isaru Kalfani had his crews at battle stations as they prepared to depart for the neighbouring worlds the Fed Sons had just attacked.
They can't catch a
When the
break.
DCA realised it wasn't them being ambushed, but rather the other way around, they broke off a third of their fleet to intercept the vulnerable FSN. Already closing range were their full complement of aerospace fighters. Kenneth now frantically dispatched a message to his counterpart aboard the Black Bear, urging her to divert their jump ships to the Nadir while she arrived in force to assist. His own jump ships were ordered to scuttle their vessels and abandon ship. Vice Admiral Stone's fleet materialized along the flank of the attacking vessels, catching them off guard. From there, the battle descended into a melee as the rest of the warships engaged one another. The conflagration drew on for 6 weeks, by which time it became apparent that both sides had lost the Battle of Shalam. When the last shot was fired on April 17th, 175 warships had been destroyed, gutting both the Dracona's Combine Admiralty and Federated Sons Navy.
If you remember what was in the reunification wars, if you remember how many ships was in the reunification wars, the Federated Sons just lost half their navy. The Federated Sons just lost half their navy. It's gone now. Oh. The Cretans also lost half their navy. This is the closest thing the Federated Sons have gotten to a draw yet, but it hurts the Cretans a lot worse. It hurts the Cretans a lot worse. Like, it hurts the Cretans massively. Because now, they don't have nearly the fleet they need to have against the Steiners if they sit there and decide they're going to take the Cretans to Pound Town. That's what's going on. It's just, well, actually comes to art redacted. Yes, that's pretty much accurate. So, yeah, the warships are just dying. They're just going. They're just dying off. And now the bad thing for the Federated Sons is they don't have the navy to really go on the offensive against the Cretans, and the Cretans don't have the navy if the Steiners realize how many ships they just lost.
The carnage wrought by the First Succession War guaranteed they would never recover from that. A further 35
All right, Razor of Doom,
ships
you have a great night, bud.
220 dropships were lost.
Oh my god.
Sadly, without the supplies the FSN fleet hoped to bring, some of the resistance groups withered on the vine. Fighting continued on Dobson, Galtor, and Kentares, but the Gorg...
There's Kentares right there. This is the one that y'all are telling me about, right? This is it. Red Eye, not even a Furyk victory. Not even a Furyk victory. There was nobody won that battle. Not a single one of them won that battle. There's not even close.
Gorgons on Franklin were wiped out, and the last mechs of Barlow's battalion were destroyed at Cussor later that year. The stubborn commander would continue to lead a small band of guerrillas for over a decade. Controlling the populace became almost impossible for the DCMS garrison, and by the end of the war, both sides had taken to calling the Cussor system Barlow's Folly.
I'll put it to you like this: the battle that just happened between those two navies, it's not fair to call it a stalemate. It's not fair to call it a draw. It's not fair to call it a win or a loss for either side. This was a devastating engagement. Nobody won, nobody lost. Both sides just, they essentially just crippled themselves, leaving themselves so open, because the free world, the Federated Sons are now, they don't have the capability to really go on the offensive at all, or defensive for that matter against Liao if Liao decides to take them on. The Cretans just lost all their steam. It's gone. It is gone. The Cretans will not be able to continue offensive operations because now the Steiners, who still have their full complement of ships, which was already bigger. Yeah. Rat Eye, nobody won. This will be the equivalent of 5 people fighting, and two people just stabbed each other so deep they can't recover from it. Flat out. Both sides lost this.
While the losses at Shalam were slightly worse for House Davian, a full 75% of their navy had been destroyed.
Oh!
They were actually the greatest beneficiary. Despite the extraordinary cost, they had succeeded in taking out virtually the entire Cretan invasion fleet, putting an instant halt on all further advances.
75% of the navy, the entire Cretan invasion fleet is gone. Good God.
For his accomplishment, Admiral Kenneth Jones was posthumously awarded the Medal Excalibur. For his shame, Taisho Isaru Kalfani took his own life on April 30th.
No, Frank, a Pyrrhic victory would be different than this. But, I don't even think it was a Pyrrhic victory. Oh, I know
Of
71.
all the worlds in the Inner Sphere, perhaps the system over which the most blood has been spilled is Andurian. Marek and Liao had fought 3 separate wars over control of the region, and a fragile truce was only ever possible through the existence of the Star League. In 2790, the Free
I remember you, Andurian.
Worlds League came to reclaim the planet which 2 centuries earlier they had voluntarily handed over. 9 warships, 4 regiments of mercenaries, and 2 of regulars descended on the planet, completely overwhelming the defenders in less than a week, at the cost of only their Soil-class heavy cruiser. The shocking seizure of one of their commonality capitals had the Capellan Strategios pointing fingers in every direction. The Eagle had humiliated them by seizing Andurian just as he had promised. Ingonish and Ryerson followed soon after, confirming that Matic was opening a second front against the Capellan Confederation.
Jeez.
Reclaiming the ancestral home of House Humphreys allowed the defenders of Andurian to form a 6th regiment for the Free Worlds League military. Matic saw similar success on their Corwood border. The Free Worlds Guards and Regulan Hussars had been largely idle so far during the war. They now embarked on a massive raiding campaign against 10 Lyran worlds. When they encountered little resistance, these raids transitioned into full invasions.
Huh.
Alhena, Dixie, and Shiloh all changed hands in 2790. The Archon was hard-pressed on our Spinwood border too. The Draconis Combine launched 8 opportunistic land grabs, while LCAF reinforcements arrived to drive them off 5 of the captured systems. A trio fell under the banner of House Kurita. Furthermore, another 5 systems were raided by the DCMS that year. The Commonwealth responded by launching an enormous raiding campaign of its own that July. Paul Steiner and Amanda Lestrade worked together to relieve the pressure on the beleaguered Federation of Sky by assigning their best units to targets in that region, but other attacks were also underway. With Lestrade's focus on Sky, command of any operations in the Bolan Thumb was given to Commandant General Arik Hasseldorf, whose strategy was to mimic the heavy raiding going on elsewhere in preparation for a larger campaign. By August, the Free Welders had taken another world in the region, Raderstov, but Hasseldorf would soon even the score. In September, he selected Valwar, the system protruding deepest into Lyran space, as his first target.
Here's the thing, the Caretans launched their attack against the Federated Suns because they viewed the Lyrans as not worthy opponents and they wanted to give the Lyrans time to get their shit together. And now I'm seeing why. Because the Lyrans can't even defend on one front against the Free Worlds League, who's currently invading the Capellans, and they can't make any headway. They can't even defend against the Caretans, who currently have their fists shoved up the Federated Sun's ass.
When the Draconis Combine raided the Tamar Pact capital and destroyed the Bolson Tamar shipyards, it became clear that the Commonwealth's defensive stance was not working to keep them out of the war. Their heavy raiding campaign was insufficient, and so for the first time in 3 years, they would go on the offensive. Each theatre commander selected a trio of worlds for the first wave, and in November, a pair of mech regiments were dispatched to each. To show her commitment to this change in policy, Archon Jennifer Steiner herself would participate in the attack on Styx. Meanwhile, Commandant General Hasseldorf timed the first phase of his campaign to reclaim the Bolan Thumb to coincide with the attacks elsewhere on the border. As they had before, the Bolan defenders on Valwar refused to surrender and fought a vicious guerrilla campaign out of the planet's jungles before the last of them were hunted down on the 23rd of December.
Okay.
Crucially, the LCAF were under strict orders not to use weapons of mass destruction.
Thank you.
While this may have resulted in greater casualties among their own forces, keeping civilian losses to a minimum was going to be essential if the fanatical worlds of the Bolan Thumb were ever to be successfully repatriated into the Lyran Commonwealth.
They're actually being smart. Good on you.
Jennifer Steiner and her escort arrived at Styx on December 12th. Making landfall 10 days later. After quickly securing the major spaceports and eliminating most of the garrison, the government surrendered to the Lyran Commonwealth.
Okay.
On January 4th, 2791, the Archon turned her attention to the last holdouts clustered within a chemical weapons plant. Detonating the site from orbit risked spreading contaminants across the planet, and so instead, she led a ground assault against the facility. As she approached the main gates, booby traps exploded directly in front of her mech, setting off an unintended chain reaction which collapsed most of the facility. Jennifer, in her command seat, was killed instantaneously.
Damn
Her
it.
body never recovered from the blast.
Why? The first leader that I've actually been okay with, and they haven't been stupid about what they're doing. Yeah, Russell, I'm getting used to that. Still going.
The death of Archon Jennifer Steiner threw the fledgling Lyran offensive, and indeed the entire realm, into complete disarray. No orders were received by the advancing regiments within the first month of her passing, allowing the Draconis Combine and Free Worlds League time to mount a counterattack.
Eternal dishonor. Hooray.
Reclaiming all
Let's
but
go.
Judonay. 3 days before her passing, another assault force had arrived to reclaim Wyatt, but those two worlds would become the sum total of the Lyran offensive. The Estates General promptly moved to have her son Richard confirmed as the Commonwealth's new Archon.
Oh, God.
He immediately set about reorganizing the Lyran High Command.
Okay.
His uncle Paul Steiner remained the general of the armies, but he was functionally removed from command. Control of the Kiritan
'cause you
theatre
kinda
was
suck,
given
bro.
over to the Duke of Kars, Graham Kelsois. This shake-up took time, and throughout 2791, the Combine was able to seize another 6 worlds.
The Combine's just on a roll right now, man.
The only Lyran commander who managed to maintain some momentum was Commandant General Hasseldorf. His raiding campaign had to be scaled back as Richard reassigned his jump ships and warships to other locations on the front, but he was nevertheless able to force the Bolan defenders off Dan Shan and liberate the recently conquered Radostov.
Okay.
The Draconis Combine campaign against the Federated Suns had also completely ground to a halt as they struggled to move reserve jump ships to the front in the wake of the Battle of Shalam.
Yep, there we go.
Throughout 2791, they made no further advances there. John Davian was glad of the reprieve and took the opportunity to rebuild his battered military using industrial assets seized in the name of the state. The only person making significant moves in 2791 was Kenyon Marek. On his push towards
Of
Sana,
course.
he took Elnath, Ibstock, and Park Place. Orient claimed Sappho,
He just needs boardwalk and then he can put down hotels.
and the Duchy of Andurian expanded by a full 11 systems. 2 more Seacav regiments were destroyed in the bargain. The Eagle's progress may not have been as bombastic as that of Jinjiro Kirita, but his campaign showed no signs of slowing. The only great loss for Marek came when his 12-year-old grandson Ward was shockingly assassinated.
Oh.
The culprit was never determined, but there was now one fewer in the line of succession between Fleet Admiral Thaddeus and his father, the Captain General. As the number of displaced citizens and refugees continued to soar, an enormous effort was undertaken by Comstar, who created the Archives branch to help trace their movement and families across the Inner Sphere.
Of course.
In time, this became a repository for not just genetic history, but also many lost technologies and records. Access to the Comstar archives is strictly controlled. Only the highest officials in the Order are aware of the full breadth of secrets contained within.
Joy.
With the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces still restructuring in 2792, the Free Worlds League military went on the offensive again around the Bolan Thumb region. However, these attacks showed the LCAF was becoming a much stronger foe than they had previously contended with. On Gypsum, the invaders were driven back, and worse, the assault force sent to Zaditsa were wiped out by the Lyran guards in garrison. Only on Alula Borealis did they successfully wrestle away a planet from House Steiner's Iron Fist. With Marek's primary focus on the Capellan Confederation, they did little more than launch raids against the Lyran border for the next few years.
Okay.
In the Federated Suns, House Davian was finally trying to recapture some of the initiative over the stalled Kiritan advance. From the Capellan end of the front, they squeezed the Kurita Bulge, primarily focusing on systems within the Marlette combat region, but also taking a couple from as far away as the Robinson operational area. Their victory was short-lived, as later that year, the Draconis Combine finally resumed its crushing conquest of the Davian state. They began by retaking the lost Marlette systems, and then immediately followed up by moving towards the capital, New Avalon. Faced with both reinforced defenses in every system and a shortage of jump ships to maneuver his forces, Jinjiro abandoned the planet-hopping strategy that had served him so well earlier in the war. Instead, he focused on completely subjugating or destroying each new world he reached before moving on.
Oh boy.
Progress was much slower, but the occupation forces had to contend with far fewer insurrections.
It actually makes better sense for them to do this. They're slowing it down, kind of like the Free Worlds League is actually doing. They're taking time to fully subjugate the planet before they move on. If the Cretans keep on doing this, Davian can't win. I mean, they're already on the back foot. They've already lost a huge amount of their like resources. They've lost monstrous amounts of industry. Yeah, the 71, they might not be able to planet hop with their navy anymore, but at the same time, the Cretans have this in the bag as long as they don't screw it up, which I have a feeling they're going to. Christian, thank you, bud. Name characters in Battletech are the opposite as in Warhammer. In Battletech, the question is if the death is cool or not, and Warhammer is how hard they win. This is very true. This is actually quite true. Avatar of King gets choked out by any Space Marine.
The Commonwealth Navy in 2792 was busy redeploying from the former Rimworld's border to more active fronts. By this point, the Lyran Intelligence Corps was reporting that only one credible threat remained within the periphery, the Finnmark Free Republic.
Leave the Finns alone.
Richard Steiner next turned his gaze.
No, leave the Finns the fuck alone.
A squadron of corvettes was broken off and tasked with the destruction of the Roe
Thank you, Christian. I really do appreciate it, man.
Finnmark. General of the armies Paul Steiner advocated for a ground campaign that would allow them to take possession of the former Amaris capital system, but Richard was only interested in extermination. Operation Haifischflossensuppe began that December.
What?
The assault squadron moved first to Dijon, claiming the world for the Commonwealth.
Okay.
They then appeared at the capital's zenith. The Lyran Commodore in charge of the operation demanded their surrender as they approached the shipyards, refusing any calls for a diplomatic solution. As the Marine boarding party landed on the orbital station, the former Rimwelders detonated a nuclear device on board.
There we go.
Several more launched from the planet itself, destroying a pair of the Lyran warships before they were able to withdraw. An hour later, the Lyran squadron returned and unleashed their full strategic arsenal on Finnmark, and didn't relent in their bombardment until the following day, by which point the entire population had been exterminated.
Oh! Well, I was waiting for it. The Steiners have committed the first exterminatus.
2 worlds of the now defunct Republic were absorbed into the Commonwealth, but the rest were left to rot. The shortage of transports available to Commandant General Hasseldorf meant his Bowl and Thumb campaign progressed only at a very slow pace following Richard's rise to power. Fewer and fewer raids were taking place, and only a single planet changed hands in 2793, where once more the Bolan defenders fought until the last mech fell. Kenyon Maddox's assault on the Capellan Confederation, by contrast, was much more successful, destroying a regiment of Andurian Hussars and taking a further 8 worlds from House Liao, half of which went to their allies in House Allison and Humphreys. Because of its strategic location right in the middle of the front, an important staging post was established on Anagasaki to support any future advance, but
Paul Steiner didn't get any pictures of Spider-Man. Yep, no, Christian, he didn't. He's a menace, anyhow. Thank you, Christian.
It was here that the campaign began to come undone.
My God.
Later in the year, a small fleet of Capellan warships arrived in system, making landfall with the Centauri Guards and 3 supporting regiments who quickly moved against the Marek supply depots. The 21st Centauri Lancers Battalion distinguished themselves by rooting out the defenders with a minimum of destruction to the munitions and equipment in storage. It was the first major loss that the Capellan Confederation had given the Free Worlds League since the New Delos massacre. Suspecting that it was the first phase of a much larger counteroffensive, the FWLM quickly changed to the defensive. This hunkering down led to the creation of a new province within the League, the Syrian Concordance.
Oh, yay.
These former Hegemony worlds quickly raised a trio of regiments for their provincial brigade, the Syrian Lancers. In reality, there was no follow-up attack planned, but the captured supplies allowed House Liao to fortify the worlds in the Eagle's path.
Marek's smugness is getting to me. It's almost personal at this point. He is so damn smug.
As 2794 began, the League found itself under pressure from both sides. Hiring a new mercenary regiment went some way to offsetting their recent losses, but their campaign against Liao had completely stalled. They were now being subjected to raiding parties, many of them suicidal in nature, slipping across the border and striking with small tactical nukes at targets of opportunity. The most severe of these was the attack on the Magna Fusion Products factory on
So far, Christian, that is very true. He has run the best campaign so far.
Orient. A pair of detonations razed both the facility and the nearby Cadet Academy. Killed at the base was the heir to the Captain Generalcy, Jason Marek. Kenyon's firstborn and 2 of his grandchildren through Karl had now been killed during the First Succession War. The only attack the Capellan Confederation came under at this time came from a highly irregular source. The Lyran Commonwealth, perhaps suspecting that the facility would soon fall to the Free Worlds League once they resumed their advance, struck the Kalin Industries facility on Assumption within the Tikhonov Commonalty in May 2794. Other more conventional raids were launched from the Alarian province against the Bolan Thumb between April and July, culminating in the successful invasion of Elajay. One of the darker chapters to come out of the First Succession War occurred on the planet Strone within the Federated Suns.
Oh god.
With the dreaded Draconis Combine fast approaching, the local Prime Minister issued laws that stripped any individual of Asian heritage of their personal property, with the paper-thin justification being that they had a higher probability of spying for Liao or Kurita. This was indicative of a growing wave of racism born primarily from fear that was permeating throughout the Davian realm. The new laws led to a widespread and long-lasting purge in which countless innocents were killed because of their ethnicity. Only the intervention of the First Prince and the post-schism New Avalon Catholic Church restored a nervous peace. The deaths were all the more senseless as Thrawn lay in the warpath and was taken by the dragon within the year.
You know what? I don't like the Cretans, but I wouldn't mind them wiping them out right now.
Even to this day, an anti-Asian sentiment lingers under the surface in some areas of the Federated Suns, though to discuss it openly is often met with derision. After a few years of rebuilding, the Lyran Commonwealth was finally ready to resume operations against the Draconis Combine. In the
I honestly thought that the Cretans have been referred to as Space Japan and stuff like that so far. In a lot of ways they've been referred to as that. But I've seen several ethnicities in the Draconis Combine. I don't understand it, but okay.
Years since he came to power, the Battletech factories on Hesperus and elsewhere in the Commonwealth had been working flat out to try and match the demand. Like everyone, the LCAF was in decline, but their prodigious industrial output allowed them to found several new regiments during the war, including 3 for the Arcturan Guards, 3 for the Donegal Guards,
True,
7 new
71.
Lyran regulars, and a 2nd regiment each for the Donegal and Sakhalin regulars. The exact date that they entered into the roles is lost to history, but the first of them would see action within the year. Duke Kelsoir's first offensive in charge of the Curitan front would also prove to be his last. It began promisingly enough with raids on Dieron and Styx and a successful liberation of
Yeah, but Rossahog, Necron.
Scondia. But things took a turn when Kelsoir accompanied his Tamar Tigers on a deep raid against Benjamin. As the capital of a powerful military district, it would most likely host a large garrison, but spies reported that the system had actually been stripped bare so that those troops might be better used against the Federated Sons. Unfortunately for Steiner, those spies were actually members of the Combine's internal security force and were feeding them false information. They waited until the Tiger...
The Cretans once again show massive amounts of competence.
...were entering the atmosphere before they sprang their trap. A trio of destroyers overwhelmed the Lyran warships and then destroyed the jump ships too, stranding Kelsoir on planet. There, he discovered that far from being deserted, Benjamin was still home to 3 mech and 12 conventional regiments.
Yep, you're done.
His own battle mechs leapt from the dropships before touching down and dispersed into the countryside, evading capture for the time being. However, those same spies now reported back to the Commonwealth that there had been no survivors of the ambush. The Duke of Kars was on his own. Begrudgingly, Richard was forced to reinstate his uncle Paul as commander of the Curitan Theatre. Over the next 2 years, the Draconis Combine was able to take advantage of the rivalry between the Archon and the General of the Armies, allowing them to seize another 4 systems from House Steiner and destroy one of their mercenary regiments, even as they closed in on New Avalon. 2795 saw the rise of one of the Capellan Confederation's great wartime leaders, Duke of Sirius and Prefect of the Tikhonov Commonalty, Sandal Quinn. As the Draconis Combine drew nearer to their ultimate goal, they passed by the Chesterton worlds that bordered the Liao state. Such planets were of little interest to them, but far more historically significant to the Confederation. The AFFS had little in the region to repel them as they continued to fortify their capital. The only new unit to appear in that corner of the front was Belinda's Irregulars a couple of years prior. Another mercenary brigade entering service with the Federated Sons in 2795 was the Fighting Urukai, but they were desperately needed elsewhere.
The Fighting Urukai. Nice.
Have the authority to bypass the Strategios, but instead called upon the mercenaries of the region to conduct his private war. He also raised a new brigade from scratch, the Chesterton Voltigeurs. In April, his assault began with landings on Castleton and Mirak. After securing those systems in the name of Tikhonov, the Duke next took aim at Farwell and Demeter that August. The Ariana Grenadiers aided him in his attack on the home of the Arcadian Cuirassiers, their first outing since the disastrous campaign on Tirfing had almost destroyed the regiment. Farwell fell after just a few weeks, while the garrison on Demeter held out for 4 months. Losing the Tamar Tigers on Benjamin halted whatever plans the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces had made for 2795. Once again, the only commander making moves that year was Arik Hasseldorf. Beginning in September, he launched raids against Kamenz and Telarska and drove the Marek militia off Lohburg by the end of November. The Free Worlds League, meanwhile, was still anticipating a counterattack from the Capellan Confederation, fortifying the worlds seized from Liao. The Callaway Lancers Planetary Guard, who had seen action during the ill-fated Second Strike by Task Force Devlin, pulled together to form a new mercenary regiment in service to House Marek. The Chancellor and her Strategios were indeed drawing up plans for a liberation campaign, aimed at both the Duchy of Andurian and the Kori salient. They began by taking Berenson, the first League planet to fall to the Capellans since Zion at the war's outset. Any further ambitions the Confederation had went up in smoke, however, as on November 18th, Barbara Liao passed away from a rare blood disorder. Her 12-year-old granddaughter, Ilsa Liao, was next in line to the throne.
That's number 2.
At the dawn of 2796, Jinjiro Kirita's campaign against the Federated Suns was reaching a crescendo. In the last 3 years, they had taken a further 19 worlds from the Cruce's march, destroying 3 more AFFS regiments, and were now only a single jump from their ultimate objective, New Avalon. As the homeworld of House Davian and the center of what at one time was considered the strongest of the successor states, the planet was heavily defended. A series of reconnaissance missions early in the year revealed the scale of the challenge that lay ahead. Nevertheless, the Draconis Combine was poised and ready to strike. When Coordinator Minoru Kirita called for a 3-month halt to the campaign, he did so over the express wishes of his son Jinjiro. Any delay at this stage only gave Davian more time to prepare, the Warlord of Galadin argued. Historians have proposed many fanciful ideas as to why Minoru paused the advance, such as giving Davian a final chance to ready themselves being in line with his personal code of Bushido, to the suggestion that the 91-year-old coordinator had simply grown tired of the killing. The reality is likely less romantic.
Right.
The battle for New Avalon would almost certainly become the longest and bloodiest of the succession wars so far. Minoru believed that it was vital that his troops were adequately rested before commencing the operation, and that the Combine supply lines were secure. Several insurrections still raged within occupied territory, and an opportunistic strike at New Roads in January had caused further disruption. In Kiritan society, each aspect of the state is reflected by one of 5 pillars:
Right.
gold, ivory, steel, teak, and jade. Ivory, for example, represented both religion and philosophy, and through them, purity and harmony. For decades, it had been the tradition of the elite Sword of Light Brigade to adopt one of these pillars as their moniker. The 6th Sword Regiment was known as the Ivory Dragon, and together with their coordinator, they were headed towards the embattled world of Kentares IV, arriving in June. The AFFS regiment on the planet had spent years operating behind enemy lines, defeating every attempt the garrison forces made to catch them. The arrival of Minoru's elites looked as if it would turn the tables, and by early August, the Cruce's lancers had been cornered within the Carmelite Mountains. The coordinator found the natural beauty of the region captivating, and so while the majority of his force closed on their suspected location, Minoru dismounted to contemplate the stunning vistas before him. From a vantage point above the town, the Successor Lord was being watched by Sergeant Latha Pischel of the AFFS. He had no idea who his target was, other than someone important based off his personal bodyguard and the presence of a Buddhist monk. Not knowing the consequences of his actions, the sniper took the shot, and on August 9th, 2786, Minoru Kirita was killed on Kentares IV.
Oh, that job. Dude. Every time I hear about one of these succession lords heading to the front line, I'm sitting there going, you're about to do something insanely stupid. And he got out to smell the flowers, and he promptly found out what 5 gum tastes like. Oh my god. So Steiner's dead. Liao has lost its head. Kurita just got sniped. Guys. Okay, so this is turning into a now. You guys have mentioned this planet name several times, and I've been wondering why. Okay, I've been wondering why this single House Davian troop, just took out the head of the entire Combine. I'm just saying, the Koreans are about to do something absolutely horrible. The Cretans are... Hey, Sven, what's up, bud? The Cretans are about to do something absolutely horrible. And what is going to wind up happening, this is just me guessing here. This is going to get very ugly very fast, and it's going to piss the Federated Sons off. I'm guessing. Let's go.
The Draconis Combine mustered soldiery exploded into activity. When the FedSun's Department of Military Intelligence deciphered some of these communications, they were shocked to learn what had happened. They understood full well that the death of Minoru meant his son would take up his mantle. They feared what sort of retribution an enraged Jinjiro would unleash. Acting to prevent the extermination of so loyal a unit, jump ships were dispatched from Sonya to collect the Cruce's lancers, evacuating most of the survivors of a years-long resistance campaign on August 28th. When word reached Jinjiro's headquarters that his father had been killed, his aide dispatched a lowly Talon sergeant to tell him the terrible news, certain that the first man who approached would be cut to pieces. Instead, Jinjiro thanked him for his honesty and commanded his deputy to commit seppuku for his cowardice. He departed for Kentares at once, flanked by the second Sword of Light, the Steel Dragon, representing the military might of the Draconis Combine. When he arrived on September 11th, 2796, he gathered the assembled officers on World and gave what is perhaps the most infamous order of the Succession Wars: kill them all. Any who refused were summarily executed themselves. The DCMS began by rounding up the entire population of Corinda City over 2 days, herding them into the Central Park, and then opening fire on the mass of civilians.
Dude.
100,000 were gunned down in just a few minutes. From there, they spread out across the planet's surface, bringing death and destruction to every major city and town on Kentares. At first, the Combine soldiers went about the slaughter dispassionately, waiting for word from Jinjiro that enough blood had been spilled. They reasoned with themselves that because the killer of the Coordinator had fled, they had left the civilians to take their place on the executioner's block. When days turned to weeks, turned to months, and still the carnage had not ended.
This is actually worse than what happened. This is actually worse than what happened to the planet that got bombarded by all three sides for asset removal. This is actually worse than the Exterminatus the Free Worlds League carried out. This is personal. This is personal. Very, very personal. Yeah, exactly, 71. This is slow, methodical extermination. This is Battletech Nanking. It's not surprising.
Those same soldiers took on a different mindset. Some began to waver in their duty, a few even risking their lives to hide survivors.
Oh, jeez.
Any who were discovered to be concealing prisoners were killed by the new Coordinator's personal guard, the Otomo. But many others took to treating the locals as vermin to be exterminated, and grew ever more brutal in their methods. By year's end, supplies and munitions had been virtually exhausted. Morale was in tatters. Soldiers were committing all sorts of atrocities on any Kentarans they stumbled upon, and yet still Jinjiro did not relent. The officers took to killing civilians by hand, using their once ceremonial swords to behead innocents by the hundreds, if not thousands. The deaths also spread to the rolls of the Draconis Combine, as many.
This is Nanking in space. That's what this is. If you are not a student of World War II, that wouldn't make much sense to you, but what the Japanese did when they took Nanking was absolutely horrific. It was completely and totally horrific. Mordrick, this is true, but this is the actions of a culture that views itself as superior, and the bad thing about cultures that do that is, quite simply put, they will find ways And this is synonymous with every single culture that has ever done this in the history of ever. They will find ways to put themselves in a position of moral superiority. No matter what they do, it's excused. It's excused for whatever reason they can figure out in their heads, and nobody really thinks about how bad it is until there's a problem. Yeah.
Many were so shamed by their own actions, they could no longer live with themselves. The once proud ivory dragon, which had represented the spirituality and ethics of House Kurita, had been permanently and irreparably tarred by the events unfolding.
Yeah, no kidding.
In the new year, the unit was disbanded, and those who didn't abandon the Combine altogether were folded into the reformed First Sword of Light. Jinjiro seemed to revel in the carnage, attending many of the executions in person, and forbidding those present to use any means but the sword to dispatch their victims. Even the pleading of the Buddhist monk who had been witness to his father's death did not move him, except to reach for his own sword so that he could cut the man down. Eventually, it proved too much for some of his enraged staff to bear. The Comstar administrator had been under house arrest at their HPG station since the genocide began, cut off from events beyond his walls. In early 2797, the defecting crew of one of Kurita's mobile HQs leaked footage of the massacre to them. Comstar then spread news of events on Kentares across the network.
Oh boy.
The citizens of the Inner Sphere, who were mostly kept in the dark about the brutality of the raging conflict, were utterly appalled at the barbarity of House Kurita, none more so than those within the Federated Suns. More than any other event in the past 10 years of fighting, Kentares galvanized the populace. They could not tolerate even one more world falling to the dragon.
There we go.
Unrest within the occupied systems skyrocketed. Remember Kentares became the watchword of 1,000 resistance movements.
There we go.
The Draconis Combine mustered soldiery were as shocked as everyone else. The involvement of the Ivory and Steel Dragon seemed a personal affront to their honor. Morale within the DCMS crumbled at what should have been their finest hour, the anticipated capture of New Avalon.
Yeah, I had a feeling something was going to happen. I had a feeling something was going to occur when this started to break down. There was, like, with them on the cusp of taking New Avalon, and with, as soon as I heard that the leader of Kurita was on his way, something was going to happen. And then, well, okay, so now, like, there's no way to light a fire underneath a populace more heavily than to show them what their conqueror will do to them, and has no problem doing to them. And House Kurita just put that on massive display. But the bad thing about it was their troops, even though extremely loyal and fanatical, they weren't prepared for doing that. Most of them weren't.
The question, of course, is why the Kentares massacre caused such outrage. By this point in the first succession...
That's a real easy thing to say. That's a real easy thing to say. Because nuclear bombardment is one thing, but killing by the sword is up close, personal, brutal. There's no way to detach from that. There's no way to mentally detach from that. You either do one of two things. You break mentally, or you become an absolute monster. There is, like, when you kill somebody with a sword, you have to look them in the eye to do it. You smell them, you hear them, all of that. A nuke falling down to a planet below does not have nearly the emotional impact. You can push that aside, and then numbers become numbers. But what they did was far worse.
War, tens of billions had already died either as a result of nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons, or from the collapse of the planetary environment that followed. As mentioned, the intelligence agencies and propaganda divisions within each realm were careful to restrict how much information was out there, but rumours of dead or abandoned worlds were fairly common by this point. The answer lies in how the actual killing was carried out.
Right.
Not once during the Kentares massacre were weapons of mass destruction used to eradicate the populace. Jinjiro flat out forbade their use. It's this last point that makes the Kentares massacre such an infamous event in human history. The fact that the brutal slaughter was carried out by thousands of individuals and not at the press of a button elevated it above other war crimes. Having video evidence of the atrocity made it all the more real for those watching and further fueled the indignation. The coordinator Jinjiro Kirita left Kentares on February 15, 2797 to resume command at the front. In the 5 months of carnage that unfolded under his watchful eye, approximately 90% of the planet's population was wiped out, either by gunshot, sword, or under the mechanical foot of an unfeeling battle mech. 52 million were dead.
Sven, I just wanted to say something to you real quick, bud. I've decided, because, you know, the time difference and everything like that, I want to finish this out this weekend on Saturday. So I'm hoping to see you there, bud. I'm hoping to see you there. Guys, this sort of thing here, this sort of thing is the reason why empires fall even in victory. This sort of... Oh, you won't have to stay up, Sven. I'm gonna schedule it for a time. I'm actually gonna try to email you after this and try to set up that time with you for where you're gonna be good and awake and everything like that. Everything like that. Yeah. Well, MN01. See, that's the biggest problem with everything right now. That's the biggest problem with everything. There was so much. This is honestly how empires die. X in chat for Sven. This is amazingly. This is the kind of stuff that, for me, being as deep into lore that I am, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I look for when I'm looking for lore. Deep explanation. This is what I go for. Oh, man. This is just unrelentingly savage. Guys, Karita... well, see, this is something I was going to talk to you about, Sven. I'd like for you to come into Discord with me when we're watching, when we're gathering up to check out this last bit in this. Oh, so you can tell me something. Okay, so there's something like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, everybody. I was saying I would love to be able to talk to Sven so he could add in stuff, because I was telling everybody, when you're doing a script like this, you're bound to miss things. And just right there, Karita nuked 1.7 billion people on Dalkith. This war has killed so many people, and it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. Guys, I actually think that this might be a good stopping point. This might be a good stopping point. Right, I know the Horus Heresy put the entire galaxy to the sword. The Horus Heresy put the entire galaxy to the sword. Yeah, Frank. That's like, it has a different emotional impact. It just has a extremely different emotional impact on the entire thing. It's because you got to remember something. In World War II, when news happened, when news came out about, certain events, it just hit different because of, what had actually transpired, like the Bataan Death March, execution of POWs, things of that nature. They had a massive impact on it. It really pissed everybody off, because the pictures of American POWs being beheaded by the Japanese pissed off the whole Western world. News of what, like, it was just, This war has been and also Filipino troops, a lot of Filipinos. This war, aside the only competently led military so far, in my estimation, besides Merrick, has been the Koreans, and they have done an absolutely impressive job taking down the Federated Sons while at the same time engaging the Steiners, even with a good majority of their fleet being debilitated. At the same time that's happening, though, they just lost the... It's one thing to realize... It's one thing to think of the last head of the Koreans as, the lead... a psychopathic leader, until you realize that he was just not even close to the one that was going to take him over. Stop talking about the Cretan Bulge. What were the casualties of the Horus Heresy? Trillions died in the heresy. And the one thing you got to remember, Rat Eye, during that time of the Horus Heresy, humans had been spread out to the stars for over 30,000 years at that point. Well, no, closer to 27,000 years. When people sit there and talk about the losses in the Reunification War, why were there only thousands, stuff like that, one thing to really remember is during that time period, most of those colonies had not had a chance to really flourish. So you were talking about a whole bunch of fledgling colonies that had been around for maybe 50, 25, 50, 100 years. Good God. Yeah. True box tank. Cody, it's something I say about 40K a lot, Director Bob. 40K is just on a different scale. It really, really nightmarishly is. The birth of Slanesh wiped out the entire Aldari Empire in an instant. Like 99.99% of the Eldar species got annihilated in an instant. Well, yeah, right about that number. Humanity during the Age of Strife became an endangered species. It only recovered during the Great Crusade, and then promptly took a nosedive during the Horus Heresy again. But yeah, that's not a here nor there. Guys, I'm gonna get in touch with Sven. What Primarch could fix this mess? Not a one, Rat Eye. And there's a couple of Primarchs that would step in, but I know who they would jump in the side of. I know what force they would take command of. So, let's just start. The Lion would definitely step immediately to take control of Karita. He would jump in and take control of Karita instantaneously. That's what he would do. Gilliman would take control of the Lion Federation because he's logistics and that's what he does. Fulgrim, he'd be in Canopus. He would just be in Canopus with the cat girls. Perturabo, honestly, Steiner. The Khan, the Taurian Coordinate. I'd say the Khan will go to the Taurian Coordinate because he doesn't want to be bothered. Let's see. Trying to think of. Mortarian would sit. Well, he'd be on Canopus too. Yeah, he'd be on Canopus. Russ, he'd be in Rosselhog, most definitely. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He'd be in Rosselhog. There's no other way to say it. No, actually, Codius Comstar would belong completely to Magnus because Magnus is a fucking wizard. Dorn would be in Steiner, of course. He would be in Steiner. he would be absolutely 1,000% in Steiner. Sanguinius, he'd be on Federated Suns. He'd be in the Federated Suns after what we just found out. He would be a Federated Sun right then and there. No questions asked. Oh, God. Who else do I want to talk about here? Lorgar, on the other hand. Lorgar would be Comstar. Alright, guys. I'm going to take off. We're going to pick this back up. Vulcan would just be giving people hugs. He wouldn't be able to dedicate himself to anybody at this point. He would just be giving people hugs. I'm going to take off, guys. I'll be putting up the live stream as soon as I get a chance to talk to Sven. I will catch you guys then. The Caretans have messed up. There's no other way to say it. There's no other way to say it. Horus preferred the kind of tactics that I think he would be with the Caretans as well. I think he would be with the Caretans as well. Before he fell to chaos. I'll see everybody on Friday for shenanigans, and then we'll finish out the Succession War, the first of them. I'll catch you guys next time. And everybody, have a good rest of your week, okay? Have a good rest of your week.
Steel, warpers on the battlefield, train tracks and iron wheels for the Emperor we wield.